all these things are gifts of life. It's all been given to us. Like life is a gift. The air that we're breathing, we don't pay for it. Like everything that actually sustains us is a gift. So if we don't catch on to this, that it is a gift and that what we give from that spirit is our gift back to life. That's what we're here. That's our fulfillment, is this reciprocity in this flow of giving and receiving. That's the basis of it. And we come to understand that by recognizing that life is interconnected.
Feed the white mouse some flower seeds. The thaw came early and freed the stream. He took the lead and kept it the whole distance. The key you designed will fit the lock. Plead to the council to free the poor thief. Better hash is made of rare beef. This plank was made for walking on. The lake sparkled in the red, hot sun. He crawled with care along the ledge. Tend the sheep while the dog wanders. Welcome back to the Passing Through podcast. For this episode, I wanted to revive the Harvard sentences because I feel like it fit with the mystic theme of this conversation. There's something strange about the Harvard sentences because they were designed to exercise the health or to exercise the quality of recording instruments. So what you're getting is a series of sentences assembled to assess the consonants and vowels and sibilants randomly arranged into 10 different sentences, and yet they seem somehow to arrange themselves in a mysterious narrative. At least to me, there's something poetic and serendipitous that happens to convey some sort of meaning as though through some weird divination. So I wanted to include them here because this week's guest is the wonderful Zamir Dhanji. I first heard Zamir at the beginning of February when he spoke at the Fugitive Futures Summit. And I was immediately struck by his eloquence and storytelling and just his natural demeanor, his ease in conversation, and everything he said really spoke to me. And I reached out to him and had the good fortune of him saying yes to speak to me, which is something that I am increasingly grateful for, that people listen to this podcast, people get something out of this podcast, and people are willing to speak to me. So I wanted to take a second to express some gratitude to the listeners and just thank you for sharing this, for liking this, for supporting this in the way that you do. Because it gives me the privilege and the honor to speak to people like Zamir. And I was really needing this conversation right now. I think it touched on many things that I've been thinking about, and it really just warmed my heart to hear someone articulating them and to know that there are people out there that are doing this work and are putting in the time and are trying to be in service to others and build communities. So this was really refreshing for me. This was really regenerative. And I hope it will be for you as well, because we talk about things that are dear to this podcast. We talk about community. We talk about practices like Buddhism, yoga, and other somatic practices. We talk about mysticism and reciprocity and the Sufis. And we even talk about Gabor Maté and his compassionate inquiry method. Talk about a lot of things. Zamir has so many stories to tell, and one of them was particularly unforgettable for me, and I think it probably will be for you as well. It happens to be about farts. And it isn't the first time that farts have emerged as a topic on this podcast. I'm wondering if it has anything to do with the name of my podcast, Passing Through, as farts often do. I wonder if the name here happens to attract this topic, something to ponder on and muse about. But not for too long, because I want to get back to Zamir. I want to get back to where you could find Zamir, and I want to get us into this episode. I want us to pass through this intro. So, to that effort, let me tell you where you could find him. You can find Zamir at zamirdhanji.com. You can find him at his yoga school at mysticyogi.com. You can find him at his community in Costa Rica at awake.cr. And Zamir happens to be offering two really interesting, really amazing programs right now. The first is happening on April 13th, and it's called Patterns to Presence. It's a program which gives participants a path to secure attachment. And it sounds really interesting, and I recommend you to check it out. The next one is a 21-day foundation program that he's offering called The Gift, which is aimed at changing culture, transforming systems, and discovering your true nature. That happens to start on July 24th, and you can find out more about it at thegift.is. All of those links to find Zamir and to find out more about his offerings will be in the show notes. So I encourage you to go there and check it out. As always, be good to one another. I will be back next time, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Zamir, welcome to the Passing Through podcast. It is an honor to sit down and speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to have received the invitation to join you in a dialogue.
Yeah, I was really struck by you when I saw you speak a month ago at the Fugitive Future Summit. And the things that you said were really resonant with me, and the way that you expressed your ideas and just your energy and everything about that talk was really beautiful to me. So I'm happy to have the chance to engage with you in real time now, just a month later. And the topics that I'd be interested in speaking to you about are things like Sufi mysticism, meditation, Buddhism, community in particular, somatic practices, your work with Gabor Maté, and compassionate inquiry, and whatever else is on your mind. These are the general topics.
All subjects I'm passionate about. I'd be happy to talk about any and all of the above. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. So maybe to start, I know for 2 decades you've been practicing mysticism. So what does that look like? Because to me and to others who hear that, sounds very intriguing, very fascinating. What does that look like?
The first thing that comes to mind is a Zen proverb, and it goes, in the beginning, a mountain is just a mountain, and a river is just a river, and a forest is just a forest. And then a mountain is not just a mountain, and a river is not just a river, and a forest is not just a forest. And then a mountain is just a mountain, and a river is just a river, and a forest is just a forest.
And what does that mean to you, this proverb?
That everything is as it is, but we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are.
Hmm.
We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. So in the beginning, when we see
Hmm.
these things all around us in our life, we don't really see it as it is. We see it as we are. And then when we realize that, all of a sudden we begin to see everything in a different light, in a different possibility, in many tones and textures and dimensions, you might say. And then as we become accustomed to not fixating in our ideas about how things are, the more everything radiates what it naturally is.
Hmm.
And so mysticism always has this initially this intriguing thing because we kind of know that there's more to the world than what it appears. And the more we connect to the reality behind it, the more natural it is to recognize that in and amongst all things. And everything's communicating something to us. So yeah, that's kind of the first place I might start with it. I'm forever, I mean, forever is a long word, but I, there's so much I don't know. I think that's the heart of mysticism is opening to this recognition that, yeah, life isn't a problem to be solved.
Yes.
It's more an ongoing mystery to be experienced.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's the other side, which is, well, what are, practices and teachings and things that help us to orient to this greater mystery, and those are often lineages, and we take us down these different paths of study and experiences and all of that, and that's I guess the practical side of it all, and even more practical, just how you pour a cup of tea or hug a friend or relate to an animal that's in your vicinity. I mean, that's all the practical thing, right? It has to translate into a more loving and open relationship with life when it comes down to
Yes.
it.
Yes, I love that. It reminds me of a phrase that I've heard Robin Wall Kimmerer use, where she talks about practical reverence, where you are engaging in this kind of reciprocal, loving, open dialogue with all of the things around you. And it sounds like you're speaking to the same thing.
There's a beautiful story about a man who goes to this mystic Hafiz because he's been having these visions of God and he wants to know if they're true. So they say, go speak to Hafiz. So he goes to Hafiz and he says, Hafiz, I've been having these visions of God. Can you tell me, are these true or not? Like, how do I know? So Hafiz says, okay, so what do you want to know? And he says, well, I mean, you're the one who should be asking me the questions, like to verify it. So he says, okay, how many goats do you have? And he says, goats? What does goats have to do with God? Like, he says, you just answer the question. He says, okay, I have 62 goats. And he says, and tell me the rose bushes. How are they doing? Were they doing well through the coming into the spring? Was it hard winter for them? And what about your in-laws? How are they doing? Are they enjoying living with you? What about your children? And like this, he asks him all these questions. And at the end, Hafez says to the man, you came to me saying that you've been having all these visions of God. I would say they were true if they make you more kind and more compassionate to every person, to every creature that you know. I like that story.
Yeah. Yeah, so do I. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious about similar stories that you know, because probably in your journey you have come across many beautiful stories and illustrative parables and Zen koans and all of these types of things. So I wonder if you have any favorites, because for me, I'm interested in Sufi mysticism. I'm a facilitator in training in a process right now that's based on M. Scott Peck's community building from the 80s. And our mentor right now, he is very heavily into Sufi mysticism. He's always quoting Rumi poems, and my understanding of Sufi mysticism is very pedestrian. I know Hafez, I know Rumi, and that's about it. And I'm wondering if someone had this kind of curiosity and they wanted to know more, How would you encourage them to deepen their familiarity with this?
By this, you mean,
The Sufi mysticism and the philosophy, the tradition, the lore.
I could speak more to the lore. I didn't train in a Sufi lineage. There's many different Sufi lineages out there, and my first exposure to the heart or essence of Sufism came through the teachings of a mystic who brought a lot of Sufism to the West. His name is Hazrat Inayat Khan. His grandson is still alive and kind of leads that order, Pirzia. And Hazrat Inayat Khan wrote this book called The Mysticism of Sound and Music. And for me, it was like the creme de la creme of mystic. It was like, okay, I relate to this life as art, as beauty, as harmony. And you start to begin to see life as music.
Yes.
And the disease in the body is a lack of rhythm and a lack of harmony. Disease in the world, disease in your life is when there's lack of rhythm and harmony. And you begin to see a more vibrational relationship to existence, that everything is in existence is energy and communication. And so I think that for me it spoke a lot to seeing the world as we started in that koan as more than just what we think it is. It's communicating, but in a language that is a language of the heart, things that we feel and that we sense, and we can tell when the rhythm is off and when there's poor tone and the harmony isn't there, right? And this is something hard to put into like words and language usually, and often the role of the mystic is if they have been given this gift, which is these people that you're talking about, like Hafez and Rumi and the poets, is that they take things that we intuitively can recognize but don't know how to clothe it in language,
Hmm.
and they put it in a language that we can use to access the heart, the intuition, which is often very much what on the spiritual path, like the challenges that we face in our life and the lessons we're here to learn, we're kind of intuiting it, right? We're like, oh, I know there's something deeper behind this, but I don't know it as an actual stage on the path of the unfolding of the infinite number of petals that are our soul. How do I know which petal this is or where on the map of the soul's journey I am?
Mm-hmm.
And so these mystics are able to orient us to this cartography of the soul and the psyche, and sometimes say like, oh, you're here, or like, oh, that's there. And that's somehow comforting to us and actually nurturing when you have to go on a journey that few maps have been left, because to go on that journey you kind of need to break with consensus reality. Like you have to follow an inner law.
Hmm.
So I almost feel, I don't even remember your original question, but that's my answer.
Yeah, the original question doesn't matter so much. I think you answered it. The question was about just speaking to the lore and the tradition, and in my opinion, you spoke to the heart of mysticism right now, and describing these poets and these mystics as cartographers that are giving us a map. Or I've heard shamanistic traditions be described as they function as bridges between the human world and the spirit world, and sort of translators. And it sounds like these poets and these mystics do the same, except they're translating the essence of this animacy, or this energy that's in the world all around us. And I guess in some traditions they would call this God, creator, source, whatever you want to call it. There's just this vibrancy that permeates everything.
Yeah, and that's the part that we initially draws us, like, a moth that's drawn to the light, right? What it doesn't realize is the closer you get to that flame, the more you're going to get burned, right? And so often the thing is we're drawn to that light and that beauty, because beauty is the language that, mysticism really ultimately tries to communicate in, you know. However, why there is the importance of a teacher, is because the thing that's holding you away from the light is your own unacknowledged shadow, your own ego, the parts of your character that you haven't refined, your fears and desires that limit you. And often we hold on to those things because, as much as they may be painful, at least they're familiar.
Mm.
They're things that, have formed to protect us. And this kind of goes into the what you were talking about, Gabor Mate, and sort of reframing the understanding of our trauma or wound. As Rumi might say, the wound is a place that the light enters.
Mm-hmm.
Leonard Cohen is kind of a modern mystic. Ring the bells that still can ring. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in, right?
Yes.
But tending to those cracks is is part of that process. So yeah, we're drawn by that light. There's a beautiful story from Rumi where he's been seeking for a long time, and finally he comes to the door of the beloved and knocks on the door, and a voice comes from behind saying, "Who's there?" And Rumi says, "It's I, Rumi." And the voice said, "Go away. There's no room for two of us in here." And Rumi's bewildered, and he travels for years searching, practicing. And after 12 years comes back and knocks on the door again. And the voice says, "Who's there?" And Rumi says, "It is you." And the door opens. So I think that's our continuous process, right? Like, we're in this, it is me, it is me, it is me. It's all about me, the me and the mine.
Mm-hmm.
That's the veil. And then the door opens the more that we say, "Oh, it's you. It's you. I see you everywhere, unfolding, playing. You're the host and I'm the guest." Otherwise, normally think that, oh, we're the host and the divine is the guest, that we're, and it's like, actually, no, we're just a guest at the table in the home. And so, how do we go through that process of change and transformation? All these metaphors are used, like cooking chickpeas, for example. They're these hard chickpeas are hard to cook, right? You need to soak them and then boil them for a long time so that they become soft, and then they're saltless. So you need to add salt to them and add spices so that they become flavorful.
Mm.
And so it's like they use these metaphors that first you got to be boiled, and you try to jump out of the pot, and then you get knocked back in, saying like, no, you don't get to escape. And we need to put some salt in there and make you flavorful. So that's a process, I think, and I experience that regularly in my life of, oh, where was I trying to jump out the pot? Or this experience is trying to add some salt to me, or yeah, I need some spices to make this offering more flavorful, you know. And yeah, so mysticism, speaks a lot more in that kind of vein, at least the Sufi aspect that I've been drawn to. So yeah, it starts very like alluring and beautiful, and then a lot of the stories are quite humbling about the process of being prepared and being cooked and being hollowed like a reed, so that the breath of the divine could play through you. But first, you need to be separated from your bed and be carved, be dried out in the sun. All these things that is our the things that our suffering
Mm.
evokes, and life carving these holes in us that eventually become the actual instruments for the song of beauty and longing to be played through us. So Sufism uses a lot of these metaphors to speak to the journey.
Mm. I love so much of what you just said. There were so many little strands that I wanted to jump off onto when you were talking about pain and fear and all of these things that are occlusions to our true selves. And in Buddhism, they call this Buddha nature. In IFS, a psychotherapeutic modality, this is the self energy. I'm sure it has many names. It sounds like it's a similar idea in compassionate inquiry. And it seems the way to, or to me at least, it seems the way that we can start to clear those occlusions are through things like meditation, music, poetry, movement. Somehow, these, whether they're somatic practices or this kind of translation or channeling or being in dialogue with whatever is at the heart of this mystery, is somehow gets us closer to it. And I guess you have insights into this as well, because yoga has been a big part of your journey.
Hmm. Yeah, Sufism has this beautiful term, polishing the mirror.
Mm,
Right? We have dust or rust on the mirror, and as we polish it, life is reflected clearly. And I think that's a lot of what you're speaking of, right? The things that polish the mirror.
mm,
Pablo Picasso said, art is that which washes away the dust that forms on the soul from everyday life. We're collecting and collecting and collecting, and we spend so much time collecting. You know, uh, there's a story of a Sufi mystic. Once he was traveling, he was always traveling through the kingdoms, but there was this king who wanted to know the most valuable things in life. And he went to his wise men. But the problem with wise men that are certified wise men, who are like paid to be wise, is that they collect so much knowledge, and it's like, well, this text says this is the most valuable, and this mystic said this, and so on and so forth. And so they're giving him just too much complication, right? And he just wants something simple. He's a king. He's just here to rule a kingdom. So he says, I need someone who really is speaking from the inner understanding, not from what they've collected. And they say, well, there's this sheikh and this mystic. He's a fakir, is what they're called. Fakir is traveling through the land, and maybe you should invite him here. So the word goes out, and the king has his people to bring this fakir to his presence, and he welcomes him very graciously to the kingdom. And he says, Fakir, I have a simple question. What are the three great pleasures of life? What are the three most valuable things? And he says, oh, that's easy. I can answer you. The first one is love. Because love, if you have love, even though you have nothing else, you have the experience of joy and beauty and satisfaction. Look at two lovers when they meet. Even though they have only one blanket between them and the stars above them in the sky and very little to eat, they are the happiest of them all. What could fulfill you greater than love? And the king says, ah, yes, this is the kind of answers I was looking for. So he says, what's the next one? He says, the second one is wealth. You see, because if you have love, then wealth actually adds greater beauty and abundance around you, not just for yourself, but you can share and give to those that you love. You, as
mm,
a king, know that the wealth that you have allows you to patronize art and to ensure the well being of those in your kingdom. And that sharing and expansion of that love through wealth brings such great pleasure to one. And he says, yes, that is true. Thank you. He says, so what's the third? He said, the third one is breaking wind. And the king is taken aback, and everyone in the court starts to laugh as if this mystic, this fakir, is trying to make fun of him. And his pride flares up. And he says, how dare you speak to me in this way? Take him out of here and throw him out of the kingdom. So they grab the mystic and they take him and they throw him on the street. So then the king finds that in the evening his stomach's not feeling very well. He's eaten his meals, but he's not able to go to the bathroom. So then he wakes up the next morning and it remains with him, this constipation. He can't release anything, no wind, anything. So then he goes through the day and he still eats, but now all of a sudden he's writhing in discomfort and indigestion, and he can't enjoy anything. He's just irritable all the time. And he realizes, oh my God, this mystic must have placed a curse on me. So he tells his people, go and bring him back urgently to the court. So the mystic is brought back in. And the king initially, starts with this offense because he's a king, right? So he thinks, offense is the best defense. So he says, you better remove whatever you did to me, or I'm going to take off your head. And the mystic begins to laugh. He says, I renounced life a long time ago. You can take my head. I will be happily to return to the source from which I came. Yeah. For the one who brought me here is the one who will take me home. You are just an agent of his blessing. So what do you do with someone like this? Right? So then the king says, okay, what do you want? He says, well, you should know. You've asked me what are the great pleasures of life. The first thing is love. I want you to give me all that is you that you love. And so he says, okay, I'll give you two of my favorite concubines. And the mystic says, what do you think? Am I a beggar? He says, no, give me everyone in your courtesans. And the king says, okay. And he says, and give me your wife also, because that's the one you cherish. And the king has no choice. So he says, okay, I give you my wife and all my courtesans in my harem. And he says, okay, now remove it. He says, yes, but what about your wealth? Should that not also be given to me? So he says, okay, I'll give you all the gold in my coffers. And he says, the gold is not enough. I want every ruby that you have, every rare gem. And the king says, okay, all of that I will give to you. He says, even that's not enough. I want every square inch of your kingdom, every paved tile, even the very one that you're standing on. Everything must be mine. And the king has no choice. How could he enjoy any of it? He's writhing in pain. So he says, okay, everything is yours. And in that moment, the mystic snaps his fingers and the king breaks wind, the biggest fart you've ever heard. And it ripples throughout the halls of his palace. And everybody's laughing. But the joy that he feels, the immense relief, never has he felt so relieved in his life, so light. And in that moment, the mystic laughs at him. He says, because you didn't get the lesson, I got all that you love and all the wealth that you've accumulated for the price of one fart. So that's why I told you. Yeah. The joy of life is not just what you're accumulating, but actually it's the joy of releasing, the joy of letting go. It's letting go. It's letting go. Yeah. So yeah, that's sort of the mystic business, right? Let go.
That is a beautiful, incredible. That is one of the greatest stories that I have maybe ever heard. So thank you for sharing that. That is such an amazing and potent illustration. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And also letting go, to go back to this community, maybe this can build a bridge into community. What we're doing in this method when we are together in a circle of other people is kind of polishing the mirror by letting go of what we have observed inside of ourselves that is clouding it. So we were trying to let go and empty our pains, our doubts, our griefs, our shame, our hatred, our judgment, our prejudice, whatever it is. And it sounds like the fart in this case is sort of a euphemism for these things as well, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, relationships are a mirror. Community is a mirror. It's a fail-safe mechanism that if we didn't have the wherewithal to look within at ourselves, we can see ourselves mirrored by others around us. Like if we couldn't just turn the mirror inside and look, which is much more difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's all fragmented, by the things that we're already biased towards where we'll see and where we'll look. Life is there to guarantee, like, we will mirror it back to you,
Yes.
right? Your situations, your relationships are going to show you your biases, your judgments, your likes, your dislikes, your attitudes, your opinions, what you're holding on to, what you're afraid of, what you desire. And so, community is the very powerful mirror. Our relationships are very powerful mirrors for that. And so, yeah, we could uh, relate in such a way that we cherish the opportunities that they give to us to see ourselves in the eyes of another,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And what is your experience like in Costa Rica at the community that you're in now? How long have you been there? What sort of practices do you all use? What challenges do you face? I'm very interested in this type of stuff as well.
Yeah, here at Awake, there's these three pillars that we imperfectly embody, sometimes intentionally or unintentionally, which is, to relate, to release, and to realize. And so, our relationships with one another, and to have this sense of greater presence and recognition of what is arising in the relating process. There's a practice here that we have called authentic relating,
Okay.
which is part of this more mindful or conscientious relating process. And then to release the patterns that we are able to recognize that arise in relationships that hold us back from connection and from intimacy and authenticity, and then realizing our own essence, our own nature. And those are, I think, an ongoing process for any human when they are in a community style environment. So what we have here is like kind of a mixed kind of community, because we're a pretty small group. We also run as a center. People come and stay with us. We have programs. We have educational programs and breath work and yoga trainings and various things that take place here, and also an extended community, because we're kind of like a nexus, a gathering point. We have this weekly dance church where 100 plus people come every week to come and dance and to connect and to speak and to circle about their experience. And so there's this community that sort of surrounds us.
Mm.
And I think this is part of how it is. Like, we're sort of mixed between, community, healing space, conscious life center, and then the larger community that comes and meets here. So it's interesting to be in this sort of emergent space. And I think these new earth centers are like that. They become infrastructures for this, emergent unfolding of what we're trying to figure out in this response to the times that we're in right now.
Yes, well, beautifully said. And I feel the same. And my partner and I, we actually just established an NGO here in Poland with the same intentions, trying to do this same thing and be a nexus, be an accelerant, be a space just where people can be and things can emerge without all of the strappings and order and clear lanes and predefined expectations and processes that are associated with modernity and all of that stuff. So I think there is great fertility in those spaces where people can just be and explore and sit with that mystery and the unknown and be in circle together and see that sometimes carnivalesque funhouse mirrors that you're surrounded by and seeing the different parts of yourself that maybe you were unwilling to look at. So yeah, I'm so excited that you're talking about this and that this is something that you are doing down where you are as well. And for how long have you been doing that?
I've been at Awake for a little over 2 years,
Hmm.
and I was involved with a community land project in 2014, where we also did an experiment with 100 acres of land in the Sunshine Coast, which I might say was kind of a failed experiment, you might say, or but part of what I think was necessary. And I'm glad that it didn't work, to be honest, because I don't think it would have been the right time or place. So I've been inquiring into this for a long time. So physically here at Awake, like I said, a little over 2 years, but in this inquiry and other spaces and other projects for quite a long time. In 2010, I heard the words of a Buddhist master, Thich Nhat Hanh, that kind of changed my life. And he said the future Buddha may not come in the form of an individual. Future Buddha may come in the form of a sangha or a community.
Yes.
And this may be the most important thing for the future of the earth. And then hearing that, I said, this is a perception worth devoting myself to, a possibility worth devoting myself to.
Mm.
And so I've been leaning into that for a long time, which has been part of the emergence of a movement, a project called The Gift, that started since back then. So I'm part of this unfolding in my world, in my life, in and through and around me for quite some time now.
Beautiful. That makes me happy that there are people like yourself out there doing this work. What I'm curious about, since you have much more experience than I do, when you said that the previous venture that you had had with the land-based community was a failure, do you have any ideas on what specifically you would do differently or what contributed to the failure?
Serving selflessly and sharing what is produced is the basis of a stable and happy society. Unless people really get that, you are not able to create that stability and happiness, which is what we want.
Hmm.
So there needs to be a pretty deep level of human maturation. And the way that we tend to be as humans is we operate through our unfulfilled or unmet needs of safety, of belonging, and self-esteem. We we tend to prioritize money and sexuality and power. And one of the beautiful things about community, it becomes a place to work it out, but most people don't know how to work it out. So it undermines the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there has to be quite a bit of discernment when trying to create a more intentional living community setting that uh, wants to birth or be in service to this, more beautiful world. It really requires that deep tending,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which is different from living together and coexisting with other humans in a larger societal framework. Like from that perspective, you don't need to be that like discerning in that way. Like you need to be very inclusive, and we all need to increase our inclusivity and less division. But in order to create the container within an intimate lived environment with others, paradoxically, you need to be quite discerning in the beginning to ensure that the right container and ingredients are there, which can look very different. You can have a lot of diverse people on the outside, but there's an ethos and a shared understanding and spirit that's rooted in character that has to be present in order for there to be strength in stability in the building of what is being generated. So that's what I would say.
Hmm. And that seems like that would be a very tricky thing to establish, to have that foundation in place where you have a group of people that possess that level of maturity and can be that foundation. Because in school, we're not taught these things. We're not taught how to collaborate and work well with others and move away from more selfish impulses towards power, towards sex, towards esteem and achievement and all of these things. It's more that competition is encouraged instead of cooperation. Suspicion and distrust are kind of fostered instead of love, trust, and being with other people. So to get that core group at the beginning out of which things can kind of blossom and grow seems like that would be particularly challenging.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, that's why all these mystery schools and mystical schools have been pretty like small, selective, and things like under the radar for a long time. And now I think we are living in a different time that we're in. But that foundation is really important. There's an Afghan saying that it's better to go to war with 10 lions than 10,000 sheep. you know. So, you got to bring there's you to bring those lion energy, lion spirit. We need all the animals in the garden. And so it's more, the sense of, I think, of giving. That's why, I call this movement the gift, is because generosity is the first opening of the bodhisattva's heart.
Mm.
Like, it's the first stage, is generosity. We are living here now on the basis of the generosity of others. Like, that's
Yes.
why we're here in this room. Like, our parents' generosity is why we exist.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a transactional exchange. It was a, let me give to help nurture and support something to grow for the well-being of the whole, of the other. Even the possibility to even talk about mysticism requires the generosity of birdsong
Mm.
and the beautiful sunset of the dance of the clouds and the rain and the sun, the waters of the river. All these things are gifts of life.
Yes.
It's all been given to us. Like, life is a gift. The air that we're breathing, we don't pay for it. Like, everything that actually sustains us is a gift.
Yes. Yes.
So if we don't catch on to this, that it is a gift, and that what we give from that spirit is our gift back to life, that's what we're here. That's our fulfillment, is this reciprocity in this flow of giving and receiving. That's the basis of it. And we come to understand that by recognizing that life is interconnected. Thich Nhat Hanh says, can you see the cloud in the piece of paper? Right? Like, before the paper was a cloud,
Yes.
and the rain, and the seed that was nurtured, and the tree that grew. Like, it's all here, connected. And then that love is the highest intelligence of life. That's the intelligence of giving and generosity. So, we when we find these principles being reflected in ourselves, and people that are drawn to this understanding, it's not that hard. Of course, there's lots of challenges, but that's the lessons for us to grow. But with this basic fundamental understanding of these principles, we can overcome anything,
Mm-hmm.
any challenge. But in the absence of that, of the heart, it becomes very difficult. It becomes very difficult. So that's the work. And that's what the mystical work is. That's the practical mysticism that we were talking about, which is the work for all of us.
Mm.
You know, it's the work for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, people can't see this podcast because it's an audio only podcast, but I'm just sitting here smiling and nodding for minutes, just really agreeing with everything that you're saying. And it's so nice to just hear these things articulated and feel that these ideas that you're describing here and laying out are actually themselves alive and moving through a current. We're feeling them in our bodies, in different places and different people all across the world and all across time, right? These aren't necessarily new ideas. That's the maybe sad part about it, is that these ideas are ancient. These ideas are so foundational to being a human being that there's a little bit of anger that sparks up in me and some irritation and frustration that, why can't we just do it? And that's part of the work too, is to sit with that feeling and have patience and and have understanding for those other feelings that aren't necessarily loving. They're frustrated, impatient, angry, hurt, jaded. And it's all of that, right? It's the whole spectrum that we have to harness and try to get into balance. And incredibly difficult work. It's, I don't know where I heard it, but I heard somebody describing it as we kind of have to be like a tightrope walker in the eye of a hurricane, dancing with like a sword in our teeth and a fire in one hand, just, you know, not moving too slow and not moving too fast. This impossible task that we're given as humans.
Hmm. That sounds like a pretty stressful situation to be in. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it is. I think for me at least, I these are things that I do wrestle with and I do feel stress about, and maybe part of that journey is
well, let
getting
me
to a
frame it
place.
maybe well, maybe think about it this way. I love this teaching by Bruce Lee. He said, "In times of duress, we don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training."
Mm,
So the training is so that in those times of duress, we have this thing that we can rest on.
hmm
That's why we train. That's why we train in all the practices. And that's on one hand, from the yoga perspective, which for me has been very instrumental of movement, of breath, of the philosophy, of mantra, especially, or zikr, if you call it in Sufism. All those practices, they polish the mirror, they create more strength in the body and mind. We need those practices. For me, yoga is a practical mysticism. And on the other hand, the things that we practice are what the realized beings and the mystics naturally express or embody. Like the Buddha is not practicing wisdom and compassion. Jesus is not practicing love. Like these beings, that is the natural expression of our divine nature, our open-hearted self. So for us, we see that, and then we have to bring them as practices until it becomes natural for us, right?
mm,
So I think the whole idea of the training of the character and the body and the emotions, this is what allows us to meet those challenges without feeling like we're in a hurricane, like on this wavering tightrope and it's all over the place, right? That reflects our training. That's a reflection of our training. The more you train, the more you can keep an even state of mind of equanimity. That's what Krishna teaches Arjun in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Yogastaha kuru karmani, establish yourself in yoga and then perform your actions. In the midst of wealth and also loss, success or failure, keep an equal mind. This equanimous mind itself is yoga.
mm,
That is what it is. So we have that capacity. If we want to do this work that you're talking about, that I'm talking about, you gotta train. You gotta prepare. With Gabor Mate's training, it was huge for me. I came to it from being a yoga instructor, yoga teacher trainer, and people were coming with some painful memories and emotions and things that came up from, intensive breath and movement practice. And I didn't know how to help them. I didn't even know I hadn't done my own trauma work. You can do yoga for a long time without doing like the deeper trauma work.
yeah.
You can be a saint on the mat and an asshole in the street. Like easily.
Yes, like many of us are. Yes.
Yeah, so that's how it is. And then at that time, Gabor was teaching compassion inquiry, and he's from my hometown in Vancouver, and I'd done a training before called Beyond Addiction, the yogic path to recovery. And I remember having this, one-on-one with him in the midst of other people in the room, and he cut through my ego. He transformed into this fearsome bodhisattva, like, the ones that you see in the Tanka paintings with like the fire
hmm
skulls and the thing. And I literally saw him transform in front of me, like slice through my ego. And that's his form of compassion. It's like, it's compassion of liberating us from our ego stories or the things that we don't see that have held us back and limited us to cling onto our sufferings. And we use inquiry with a deeply compassionate listening space to help us feel those things that we haven't felt safe to feel or we weren't able to, so that we can let go of of what holds us back. So, I experienced that with him. I said, oh, I want to train in what he does. And in that process of training, we work on ourselves. And, I had many experiences of recognizing early wounds, relational wounds with parents or lovers that, were unconsciously playing through my life. And that made me more able to support other people. I got approached by a behavioral scientist, Sabrina Lakhani, who was working to help people through their attachment patterns. And she asked me to support them through compassionate inquiry. And that led through a program called Patterns to Presence, which we've now had 140 people go through, so that people are able to, through a contained, structured environment, to look into their wounds that are opportunities for learning lessons and healing, and supported in a compassionate way to transform them through embodied presence. And it takes this top down cognitive approach and this bottom up somatic approach. And we were able to develop this of working with clients. But all these things are the kinds of tools that in modern times can support us to be prepared for the work of repair, in order to work together with others to create something that's stable and good and beautiful and true.
Mm.
Like, we need to shift those things. So it's there. My work has been through my own process of healing, through yoga and attachment work, and through poetry and through music. And they all became part of my medicine bag.
Yes.
And that medicine bag becomes, my pathway of supporting others, in the healing process. And, we need to find our medicines through the process of tending to our wounds. But all medicine seeks is pain to cure. That's the purpose of medicine.
Mm.
That's what it's there for. So, like, medicine is waiting for you. And when it gifts itself to you, you start to be able to administer it to others. I remember hosting these Buddhist monks. They were from Tibet, for a gathering I was doing in Canada. And they said something that always stayed with me. They said that in our tradition, the Buddha is the doctor, and the Dharma, the teachings, that's the medicine.
Mm.
And the monks are the nurses. We're here to administer the medicine from the doctor, which is the Buddha. And the Buddha is our own awakened consciousness. And the Dharma is the wisdom and the teachings, the clarity that arises from this consciousness. And the Sangha, the monks, are the ones who are here to administer that teaching, that clarity, so that others may realize it within themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all in this process of, through the discovery of the Dharma, through the recognition of our authentic self, the recognition of our true nature, becoming agents of medicine in any given moment to another. For me, that's a medicine culture. It's not sitting drinking ayahuasca and wachuma until, like that. I don't think that's going to be the culture.
Yes.
We need a true medicine culture where we're sourcing it from our connection to that which is pure and good and true and beautiful, that's natural within ourselves. We
Yes.
can be that for each other. And that is the future Buddha. We're doing that work, and we reflect that back to each other, and we give to each other of the very same well that we're all drinking from, and we keep that well pure. We know when poison is coming to the well, and we're like, no, because we're drinking from the self same well that we're all nourishing each other from. And that's this collective mind that is caring, the collective heart that's caring to keep that well beautiful and pure.
Hmm. Yeah, beautiful imagery again, and beautiful storytelling. Mm. Yeah, thank you for that wisdom and for sharing that medicine. I do think that speech, like poetry, like music, like somatic practices, like movement, dance, is medicinal. It is an earth intelligence, moving through us, vibrating our bodies, and coming out of us to go into the other, right? So you speak something and it goes out through the air, and now it's in my ears, and it's affecting me. It's moving something in me, and it's cleansing that water, you know. So yeah, thank you. That's beautiful.
Well, I lean on those words. I feel, in moments of privilege to be a nurse. I'm not the doctor. It's
Yes.
the medicine, and I want to share that medicine. And in the sharing of that medicine, it's also a continuous process of healing for me. Like when we
Hmm.
give something something flows through us that is from our hearts, that is that love. It The sharing of that love heals us. Like it's something we just have to realize that sharing joy, sharing love, sharing kindness, it's healing on a physical level.
Yes.
It's healing ourselves. Like
Yeah.
it's something that we by becoming a vessel for it, it passes through us, but it leaves something nice behind, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. You're reminding me vividly of the first time I was in one of these community building circles, and I was calling it, when I was describing it to people, this phenomenon of like splashback. It's not maybe the most beautiful word for it, but I found myself giving this love to people who were in the circles, sharing great vulnerability, pain, and maybe even saying things that I've said to myself. But hearing another person say these things, I was going, oh my God, you feel the same pain. And my heart was just broken open, like someone took a crowbar to the hinges of my heart and just love was pouring out for this person. And what you're describing happened where I felt, by pouring love onto this person, I realized, wait a minute, why don't I pour the same love on myself when I have this pain, when I feel this kind of despair? And I felt a sadness in that moment and said, oh my God, like I so easily, so readily give it to another. And just by doing it, it did, some made contact with me, and there was some healing that happened, and it was a very visceral experience. I remember it, deeply. So what you're saying is true, and yeah, that is the way. That's the doorway that we need to walk through.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for saying that. If we start to track it back, it's easy for us to give that to other people, and it's harder to give it to ourselves, often because that was something we didn't receive when we needed it when we were children.
Mm,
That's a very common thing that I see, and that's the irony, and why life is a teacher and relationships are a teacher. We get to see how they reflect back to us. Oh, that's something I would have loved to receive.
mm. Yeah, and paradoxically, we do receive it in giving. So it's yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, authenticity is so important because there's a lot of studies out. Gabor Mate speaks a lot about this, about the chronic caregiving, and the rates of cancer, and not even, maybe when I say chronic, I mean people who I self-identify as, like, I need to take care of everyone, and then also actually people who take care of you know elderly and sick, or hospice people, or children with disabilities, or like who are constantly having to like take care and give. Literally, their telomeres are shorter. Like
Mm,
their body is older biologically than their age. And so the quality of our giving, of how things flow through us, is important. It's important. And that's where the healing work and the trauma work is so important, because that allows us to not give unconsciously from a space of lack and obligation, which actually saps our life force because it's not flowing through. Maybe a conversation for another time, but it is fascinating that this interplay between attachment and authenticity is very important in the process. And then I would say that the Dharma teachings are very important as well. So we become a good vessel, clear channel for that giving.
mm. Yeah, I would love to. This conversation is so rich for me. I would love to dig into all of that stuff and so many other things too. But obviously, I know we're coming up on time now, and I want to respect your time. So that will have to be for a future day. But I wanted to reserve the last part of the podcast for you. If you have any events coming up, if there's anything that you want to talk about, or where people can find you, and all of those types of things, just to wrap us up.
Yeah, happily. They could find me at our website. My name's zamirdhanji.com. The things that I'm, pretty passionate about, I touched on briefly. We have a regular enrollment of a cohort in our Patterns to Presence program, which is a path to secure attachment. And so if people are interested in that in a structured container, they can learn about that through patternstopresence.com. And then starting something called Yoga School. I've been leading yoga teacher trainings for a number of years, but I also realized that it's become an industry. Like anybody can buy a yoga teacher certification, and it's
Yes.
diving down to the bottom of a barrel where people are like 3 week yoga teacher training, 2.5 weeks. And it's like, wait a minute, this is not true. That you can't just become a teacher of something without even really submitting oneself to the process of a student. And what does that produce for you? Where is the sense of you actually need to receive yoga before you give it?
Mm,
Someone can't just stuff it in you in 2 weeks and be like, oh, you got yoga now. So the idea of yoga school is like a true sanctuary for people to learn, heal, and actually engage with this thousands-year old art, wisdom, and practice of yoga. Maybe deciding after some time to become a teacher, and we can support that. So that's going to be here at Awake in May, and they can go to mysticyogi.com to learn about that, or the Awake website. But we'll keep it ongoing. And the last one that I'm over the moon about is what I shared with you about the gift. And the Gift Academy is a 21-day foundation program to start, which is like an accelerator for changing culture, transforming systems, and realizing your true nature. And these foundations is based on 4 inquiries from the perspective of the inner individual, the outer individual, the inner group, and the outer group. So it's quite holistic.
mm,
And we're pioneering these new diploma tracks that I think are going to be like the educational pathways for many of these future archetypes of what we need to be embodied in the world that have been around for a long time. The path of the healer and the storyteller, the path of the architect of the invisible, the path of the earth keeper, and the formal names of them are like cultural therapy, social architecture, and ecology and environmental design. And so if you want to be at the intersection of social innovation and therapeutic work and culture change and ecology, like this is a school for those people who want to be immersed in that. And we're attracting some amazing teachers. So if that's of interest to you, you could go to thegift.is.is and learn about that. So up to a few things, and inviting people to come join the adventure with me.
amazing. All of that work sounds incredible, and thank you for providing that service. And yeah, that warms my heart to know that that's happening. So thank you for that. And I'll put all the links and info in the show notes for that for people. And
Thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Dhanji.
yes, you as well, Zamir. This was a very it's hard to choose a word. It's been very nourishing for me. That's the word I would choose there. It's great to see you and hear you and listen to your stories. And yeah, this has been wonderful. So thank you for your time. Thank you for passing through with me. And I look forward to maybe chatting to you again.
Happy to pass through with you. I love that name, passing through. Yeah, I get it now.